Welcome to Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed. Get ready to dive into the world of nonprofit leadership and sustainability, where the passion and unstoppable dedication of those making a real impact are celebrated. With your host, Jarrett Ransom, get ready to explore inspiring stories and game changing strategies of nonprofit leaders from across the sector. In this season, we're focusing on critical management challenges that are key to the long-term success of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit Nerd Impact Unleashed is your go-to podcast for no-nonsense, in-depth conversations with the real-life superheroes of the nonprofit sector. Get ready to unleash your inner nerdiness and learn how to navigate and overcome the challenges that help build stronger, more sustainable organizations. Now, let's dive in and harness the collective power of our nonprofit networks to create lasting change.
Welcome back, fellow nonprofit nerds. Today, I am excited to welcome Sean Kosofsky, the nonprofit fixer, to the podcast. And in our conversation, Shaun dives into imposter syndrome, why every executive director should have an employment contract, and believe it or not, why doing less might actually be key to doing more. Yes, you heard that right. He's a big fan of doing less. Shaun often refers to himself as a coach-sultant, rather cool. And that's blending the coach and the consulting to help nonprofit leaders like yourself navigate your roles with more confidence and balance. Shaun is a wealth of knowledge, and I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Also, a huge thank you to Bloomerang and Chazen for sponsoring season 5. Your support makes these important conversations possible. And how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good. So I'm in Arizona, but I got to tell you, we're getting a lot of rain and I am loving that. So where are you joining us from? And tell us your weather news as well.
I'm in New York City, downtown Manhattan, and the weather has been all over the place in the past 10 days or so. It was a little cool. The past few days, it's been like in the 50s, maybe almost 60 degrees. And then all of a sudden today, it's chilly again. So a little all over the place, but I can see plants coming out of the ground, so I know spring is upon us.
It is coming. Well, love it. And for all of our listeners, I had the fantastic honor and privilege of meeting Shaun at a conference in Florida. I can't really say it was sunny, but it was a fantastic time. We got to spend a couple of days together, have some dinner and some drinks together. So I've really gotten to know you. I am thrilled to have you join us today, Shaun, and share with our listeners a little bit about yourself. So to start us off, would you do just that? Share a little bit of your background and how you show up. Like, what is your role in this nonprofit space?
So I grew up in Metro Detroit. I was born and raised in the city of Detroit. And then in my teen years, where I moved out to the suburbs, was in Michigan for about 32 years before I moved to North Carolina. I think my nonprofit career started at 16, very young. So while I was in high school, very involved in environmental work, Democratic Party politics, did a lot of door knocking for the environment. And then coming out of the closet my senior year of high school was transformational for me. I sometimes will say that being gay has been easy, but the closet almost killed me. And so, like, the experience of coming out of the closet, how difficult my teen years had been until that point, has powered my activism and powered my nonprofit work for my entire career. So came out, did work for the LGBT rights for 12 years. Then I moved to North Carolina and did work for women's reproductive justice and also progressive voting and campaign work in North Carolina. And then did some work around polling, a lot of political party work and ballot measures in my career. And then later on did work around bullying prevention and climate change. So I've been in the movement now with different progressive movements for about 33, 34 years. And the way I sort of see myself is I went from being an activist in my 20s to an executive director in my 30s and 40s. And this is like my third act as a consultant, now helping to train and coach and support all of the leaders in the movement. So I get to work with lots of purpose-driven organizations without having to raise money myself or have to report to a board. So I get to kind of like sit there and support other leaders, and it's terrific. I love owning my own business, serving the sector.
Fantastic. I don't think we got that deep in our conversation over dinner. We got deep in other conversations, which were also so much fun. And so really, I love that. And I just want to say thank you, truly. Thank you for your activism. Thank you for your vulnerability. Just, all that you have done and all that you are for yourself. I have a commitment to show up for myself in all the ways and spaces and places in an authentic way. And I certainly see that with yourself as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you shared a lot. You do a lot. Your third act, you're really like rolling up your sleeves, still helping so many different organizations and leaders. I can only imagine that your previous acts, right, and within your previous careers have really rattled some cages for today's climate. So right now, right, today's climate too, there's a lot going on, but burnout and stress are prevalent. So like if we were to ask our listeners right now, hey, raise your hand. My hand is raised, right? Like I'm a little burned out. I'm a lot stressed. And that, again, it's just prevalent in our sector and it's prevalent in our leadership. So how do you see this sustainability and leadership truly evolving, especially, right, as we're all trying to balance our missions and our personal well-being?
Yeah, I think since COVID especially, well, the nonprofit sector has been professionalizing for years. And with that comes more um, regimented organizations, more rules, more sophistication, all this different stuff is happening. And at the same time, we have COVID, which happened, which I believe was a catalyzing event for a lot of people to reprioritize what matters to them. I think a lot of people who were able to shepherd their organization through a global pandemic and get to the other side had made a lot of difficult decisions about what to do next, right? Like I personally was burned out through COVID, helped my organization a lot, but as an extrovert living in San Francisco, which was a very tough lockdown city, either COVID either broke me or broke me open. It totally changed me. And I just wanted to shift what I was doing in the sector also. Like the pressure of having to raise a certain amount of money every single month to pay my staff, that was like a lot. I had done that for 15 years, so I needed a break from that part of the work. So I understand like why people are so stressed out. One of the things that I think is really critical is that there is a lot expected of us without much training. Most nonprofit leaders don't get management training. They don't get an onboarding. They don't get orientation. They just get thrown in the deep end without much support. You wouldn't throw any worker in any company into the deep end without giving them supports. But for some reason, we think the entrepreneurial and skill set and passion of a nonprofit leader, they'll just figure it out, right? And because they love this work. And it's not sustainable and it's not healthy to expect that of our leaders. It's pretty extractive, actually, to pull that labor out of them without expecting some kind of balance and support.
Yeah, that is so true. And I don't see a lot of training done, right? And I really just see the here you are, right? And here you are is often shark infested waters.
Yes.
There's a lot going on. So when you work, I'm really curious. So when you work with your executive directors, because you do provide coaching, and when it comes to this stress and training and burnout and everything, how are you helping them? And I should say coaching them, right? Like push past those limits. Maybe you're helping them negotiate for better pay, better terms, schedules. Can you share an example of what that looks like?
Yeah, some earlier career executive directors might be confused by what the role entails. So we'll go through the 10 areas of a nonprofit that an executive director has to master, right? Everything from like human resources to management, fundraising, building the board. There's 10 areas, and I show people how, if you've got those 10 areas down, you can confidently run any nonprofit in the United States, period. So just master those 10 areas. That's one thing we do earlier in their career. The other thing early career EDs will come to me with, or leaders who want to be an ED, maybe they're a founder, maybe they're a board chair, is imposter syndrome. And that is really prevalent in a lot of sectors. But when you're an entrepreneur, and most executive directors are, we're making something out of nothing every single day. That's what nonprofits do. And we have a vision, we want it funded, and we're just like entrepreneurs. So a lot of them are facing imposter syndrome, like, who am I to be leading this place? I don't have a master's degree, or I've never run a nonprofit. And they're really struggling with this, thinking they have to interview for the job they already have. And that's really something that we face a lot more. Women face this, I think, even more than men, but a lot of nonprofit leaders face imposter syndrome. And later career executive directors will sometimes come and say, maybe the organization just went through something really difficult, like a merger or stress or a scandal, or someone was canceled, or they're just burned out. Later career folks. So in both of those situations, what I coach them on is whatever they need in that moment. So for example, building up their confidence, right? I mean, sometimes people are afraid of making mistakes. And I remind them, like, the biggest person in the world, like the president of the United States, probably makes mistakes every single day at a huge level. And they just kind of get through it, whether there's a lot of eyes on them, there's a lot of scrutiny, and they still are able to pick themselves up every day and like work through those errors and those mistakes with all of this scrutiny. So whatever we're doing is nothing compared to what they're able to do, right? So don't take yourself too seriously. Don't get too mired up into the mistakes. If you fail forward as often as you can. Try to like fail and win. Even if you lose an election, at least you're losing with new assets in hand. If you mess up some grant, at least you'll have a lot of lessons learned. And so that's one of the things we do. For later career folks, and even some earlier career folks, I do coach them on getting a better salary, making sure they have an employment contract. I'm just vocal. I feel like I'm the only person in our sector screaming from the rooftop that nonprofit executive directors need security. If you dedicate your life to service, you should have the security of a contract. It should be very difficult to fire an executive director so that they are not constantly worried about whether a volunteer board is going to fire them. People who don't even work there are going to fire them, and they should be focused on the mission. And so I help people understand how to get that contract and just get yourself protected. And then set up your own systems, write your own job description, because you can. Create your own evaluation every year, because you can. Negotiate for better pay, because who else are they going to pick, right? There's a lot of power you can get to make this organization and this mission work with you and for you and not be crushing you. And so I help people with those sorts of things.
Imposter syndrome comes up a lot. It has come up for me. And I remember seeing a meme, right? Something on social media that really just resonated with me, Shaun. And I might be butchering it, but it was essentially like, when you feel imposter syndrome, that simply means you are leveling up to a new place that you simply haven't been yet. Right. And that hit home for me, because I was like, okay, I can get behind that, because I'm constantly striving to level up, constantly striving with intention to become a better leader, become a better version of Jarrett Ransom, right? And so to see that imposter syndrome definition as that, I was like, okay, yeah, that means I have felt this many times in my life and my career, and it simply means I'm ready for that next level. So I'm curious, does that resonate with you as well? And maybe those that you're coaching?
It does resonate, but I will push back on the sentiment. I think is true. Whenever you're stressed, whenever you're a little nervous, whenever you're a little worried about the next step, that means you're probably advancing. But the imposter word is the part of it that I want to put. I want to make sure people don't feel like that. That should not be something you live with forever. Every time you're going to the next level, if you're constantly dealing with that, you've got some self-esteem issues, or you've got some confidence issues, or a mindset shift that needs to take place. Chances are you are awesome at what you're doing. But this word imposter, not just like stress or worry. We all worried if you want to do a good job. Everyone does that, corporate levels down to small nonprofits. But if you're constantly feeling like an imposter, then we've got to level set. Something's going on there that makes you feel like your peers are somehow have something you don't. And with a little shift, that hopefully will go away after the third or fourth big challenge, right? So that's the only tiny part of it that I heard and thought that it's not always good for it to be imposter-y.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I love the pushback, because I can see that, right? If it's like, okay, that's probably a negative belief that we're hanging on to. And negative beliefs, when it comes to adapting to change is the constant, I want to say, in our sector, but truly in our world, right? Like change. So, currently all of us, we're facing economic changes, social changes. So what are some of the strategies that you're using with the organizations you're working with, the leaders, the EDs that you're working with, to adapt to this, right? So that they're not sacrificing their own well-being. They're not being faced with that burnout. They're not being faced with that stress or even that termination, right? Like, how are you doing this?
I do believe we should hold our boards to higher standards. So one of the things that we typically do, I think the number one problem in most nonprofits isn't fundraising, it's having a crappy board. It is like some founder or some ED just grabbed 12 carbon-based humans who are willing to make 12 meetings a year, and that's the lowest common denominator of how we build our boards. We should be saying, I'm going to make you an owner of this corporation, and all owners of all corporations are responsible for revenue. So I'm not going to have you be a normal volunteer. You're going to own this place. And with that comes great responsibility. And so I need my board members to reply to my emails, to show up for meetings, and to raise money. And when we have those higher standards, then at least we don't feel like we're alone. A lot of executive directors feel alone, in the deep end, isolated. And they're being judged and governed and evaluated every year by a bunch of non-expert volunteers that are there once a year who don't have skin in the game. So it's just a structural thing in our sector. So to keep people from burning out, to keep people from going through all this, I believe we hold our boards to a high standard by training them, giving them an orientation, crystal clarity on what the role is, make them sign a board agreement promising they're going to uphold what they said they're going to do, pay their bills when they pass a budget. They have to resource that budget that they just passed, and then support that executive director, understand the stresses and the isolation and how tough it is. So we need to build organizations where the board and the ED are partners and supporting each other. So I'm seeing those shifts happen a little bit. After you've been in the sector a while, people know this is actually how a nonprofit is supposed to function, and moving toward a more sophisticated a shared kind of like leadership role instead of like the ED is subservient to and working for a board that somehow governs and knows better.
Right. And they not only have one, boss, they have 27 bosses or 30, there's so many more. I want to go back to crappy, right? Like, and I'm really curious because can you fire a crappy board member, or like, how do you manage that conflict, right? If they're not showing up, if they're not attending the meetings, if they simply just have a pulse or can fog a mirror, which I know are two litmus tests, right? That many of my clients have used. It's like, oh, great, you responded to this email or you showed up for free lunch. Would you like to join our board? And it's like, please don't do that, right? So if we have a crappy board, if we, our listeners are like, thank you, Shaun, for calling that out, is it possible to fire these board members? And what does that conversation look like?
So legally, technically, an ED can't fire anyone on the board, but metaphorically speaking, yes, you can ask someone to leave, you can push them out, you can invite them to not renew their term. And this is how you basically do that. Most board members think the ED is really running the place. They don't really see themselves as running the place. They see themselves as gathering once a month, evaluating some stuff, and then calling the meeting adjourned, right? A lot of them really do see the ED as running the place. So they would take it very seriously if the ED asked them to leave. So we do have the power as executive directors to lean on board members to say, listen, you're really not doing any of the things we asked you to, and you're really not doing any of the things we need you to. That's nothing, you could just be busy. Joiners typically are busy. This isn't a judgment on you, but what we need at this moment is X, and it feels like you're only able to deliver Y. So why don't you either take a step back for a year or two and come back when you're able to deliver what we need, or join a committee or just be a regular volunteer. You don't get to necessarily be on the board, the owner of the corporation, just because you have a great heart and want to see good things happen. We need a certain level of performance from our board. So in your bylaws, there should be a rule that allows you to kick someone off the board if they just don't show up for a certain number of meetings or for no confidence vote on the board. And then in addition to that, I believe the board agreement, which is a softer kind of contract that board members can sign, promising to do three things: avoid conflicts of interest, participate in fundraising, and show up and be participatory in meetings. If they don't do those three things, they're off, and they know that they should be off the board. So I think that those are healthy ways to do that. I have a blog post on my site where I go through with ChatGPT, literally creating a email to a board member, inviting them to leave the board, like basically firing a board member. And so you can do this, and I think most board members would be mortified if they had to be invited to leave because they weren't participating, right? They would be a little embarrassed. But every now and then, some believe, no, I was voted in by the membership or by the board. I'm the boss here, not you. Don't come for me. But 9 times out of 10, the executive director can exert influence to get someone who's not participating off the board.
Yes. I'm sure you've heard it, but it's like plaque them and whack them, right? Like, let's purchase a plaque and let's say, thank you for being here. It's time for you to leave. The other term of that, right, is bless and release. It is simply time. You've done your work, all that you're going to do at this time. And now it's time for us to release you. What if your whole board is like that, right? Like, what if you don't have 100% by 100%?
Right. Well, when I was brought into NARAL in North Carolina, I came in August of 08, right as the national economy was collapsing in that fall. My board at the time, God bless them, terrific, friendly group of people. They were never told when they were invited to the board, which is standard for a lot of boards, they were never told they needed to fundraise. Literally, the economy was like falling down in pieces around us, and I was brand new to North Carolina, and I needed to learn how to raise money there. So I asked the board, this is what I need from you all. And if you can't do these things this year, I want to know now whether you are willing to leave the board in a year if you can't do these things. The whole board promised they would raise money. And then 11 months in to the fiscal year, like 8 of those board members had not raised a penny and all like resigned on the same day because they could see the deadline coming, right? So instead of giving me time or giving me like a heads up, hey, I think it's not going to work for me, they all waited until like there was basically no time. If they had all left on the same day under our bylaws, we wouldn't exist. Like they literally almost annihilated us. So I had them roll off in phases and got them to replace themselves. And so eventually I rebuilt the entire board, like 90% of the board was rebuilt and all of them were fundraising. So in that situation, I literally turned around an entire board in a year, in the hardest year possible to not have support. I had to actually get rid of them all. And we did it in a nice way. They all understood they could just fill some other role. But what we needed, we weren't selling widgets. We weren't just planting flowers. We were there for women's health, right? And so this was a big deal and they needed to take it seriously. And if they couldn't pitch in, let's make room for people who could. So we did do that.
So that can be done. So all of our listeners that are thinking, yeah, it'd be great to fire that crappy board member, but I have 12 of them, right? Right? Like, here you go. Shaun has a real world example of what that looks like. And you've mentioned the responsibility of the ED. And I agree, it is hefty. There is a lot on that plate. That role often feels isolated, siloed. I refer to it as like shark infested water, right? But really, the ED is not only managing the board and working with the board, but they have operations to think about. They have staff development to think about. So how are you working with EDs and supporting these EDs, right, to create a healthy balance between that operational efficiency and also ensuring their staff are taken care of? Because we as EDs, I say we because I also serve as interim executive director. That's one of my service lines. But how do we ensure that not only are we not facing burnout and stress, but our team is not facing burnout and stress? I'm really curious how you coach the EDs to balance that.
Most EDs that seek coaching or end up in coaching are self-aware enough to know that they probably are more protective of their staff than themselves. So they're more likely to burn out than their staff are, because if by the time you sought coaching, you're self-aware enough to know, hey, I need some help here. I'm trying to create the right conditions for my team to succeed, but I don't know if I'm actually following my own rules, right? I've seen it time after time where EDs underpay themselves or go without a salary or make sacrifices and pick up the slack or take back the work they delegated. All of those things are happening. So one of the things I believe is important, and no one says this, people don't say this often enough in the nonprofit space, do less. Do less. We are like 800% more productive than we were 25 years ago. We are the highest productive society and country on earth if we just keep producing, because the software is letting us get faster and we're getting smarter. We're just continually producing more and more. We're not noticing it because we're just working the same number of hours, but we're really way more productive than we have ever been. So what if we slowed that down? What if we actually did less? And what if, in addition to doing less, like literally carving out huge blocks of time on your calendar to do nothing, like to just think, because leaders need time to think. Our best decisions come when we can turn decisions around in our head. Should this board member be here? What are the ramifications of this software? Like really thinking through. And so creating time on your calendar to think things through, creating time for nothing, creating entire days for no meetings. I believe in no meeting days. On Mondays, I do no meeting days. So I get so much work done on Monday. It clears my head for the rest of the week. And doing less is one part of it. Telling the board there's no more capacity. There's no more capacity to do this, this, and this. And then passing that down to your staff. But then the one other thing I'll say is funders really want to see that nonprofits are going to scale. What if we push back on that and say, actually, we don't want to scale. We want to stay small. Evolution has always benefited smaller creatures over larger creatures, right? It's the insects that survive, not the dinosaurs. So if we stay small and stay nimble and actually don't build an expensive central bloated core of staff and instead just stay nimble and small and move throughout how the culture and how the economy are helping us move through this, we can actually stay small, do a few things well instead of 20 things poorly, and excel. The minute you make a decision, we're only going to stay at 3 staff, and that's okay forever. Let other groups bloom, let other groups do stuff. The stress level just falls. I can watch executive directors. No one's ever told them before, what do you mean I can do less and stay small? Like, why is that even acceptable? I've never heard that. And some companies decide to just do that. The local bakery doesn't want 4 more bakeries in their chain. They just want one little bakery, right? Like, why in nonprofits do we always feel the pressure to scale?
Yes. Oh my gosh. You're preaching to the choir for sure. But everything you're saying too, Shaun, I'm like, I see that. I feel it. I've done that. I've been in those conversations, right? And I love the insect dinosaurs because it's such an analogy that I can see, right? Like, where are all the pterodactyls? They're gone. Where have they flown to? Yeah, there's so much good.
That's also one of my favorite drag names, pterodactyl.
There you go. There you have it. I love that. Well, so much good information here. I know we could talk for hours. I am definitely drinking the Kool-Aid of what you're serving up, Shaun. You've got a brain for this. You've got the confidence, the poise for all of this. So, I'm sure listeners are like, okay, I'm interested in coaching, or I want to know more about these, these 10 lists that you mentioned, things like that. Permission slip to do less. Thank you. Right? Like kudos to that. So how can people learn more about you and the services you offer through your company?
Definitely go to nonprofitfixer.com. That's where you'll find everything. I have a YouTube channel, but you can find it at nonprofitfixer.com. I have a blog. I have a free tools page. I give away dozens and dozens of free resources to see whether or not the way I talk, the way I teach, the way I coach is right for you before you want to work with me. But I've been very, very fortunate and very, very lucky to have universally positive testimonials and feedback from people I've coached because I'm no nonsense. I tell it like it is. I'm very supportive, but also very direct in what needs to happen. And people usually like a blend of coaching and consulting. Coach-sulting is sort of what I call it. And that's like what I provide. People want you to kind of guide them a little bit and give them choices and diagnose the problem with them and then dig in. So I do think that's where they can find me, is just nonprofitfixer.com, and you can take some of my free resources and see whether or not I'm your cup of tea.
Oh, I love that. And one final question, right? Is there a takeaway that you would want to leave our listeners with today?
I think the single most important thing that I would want people to leave with today is that salary and compensation and rest and these things, we are owed these things. Like, nonprofits do not have to be in a poverty mindset. We don't have to be completely exhausted and broke and burned out and to find that somehow we have some halo effect or some angel effect by suffering. We have to stop catering to that poverty mindset and start really advocating for our organizations to take care of us, because the organization doesn't just take care of the people we serve, it has to take care of the people serving, right? The staff. So we need to do that. So we should fight for good pay. We should fight for more rest. We should fight for balance so we can do a purpose-driven career that also pays.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure it's music to many listeners' ears right now. Shaun, thank you. Thanks again for all you do. I know I started the episode with a thank you and I'm ending it with a thank you. Every time we have a conversation, I gain so much knowledge, and I know you've dropped so much knowledge and nuggets of information for our listeners. So thanks for joining today.
Thank you.